Hi, I'm Danielle Photo, founder of Momentum Marketing. I help marketing agencies build their own marketing systems in order to become resilient businesses. And today, take a little excursion with me to a little garden in your mind. Because although the intrinsic truths of life are evident all around us, including in our agencies, it can be very easy to miss the signs that we should be seeing as leaders, especially with the busyness and daily demands of operating a company. However, when we miss the small yet important nuances of what's happening at our agencies, both above and below the surface, we may fail to adequately nurture our agencies and our team members and subsequently fail to produce the best possible outcomes for our people and for our businesses. It takes high levels of intentionality and proactivity paired with responsiveness, flexibility to establish a resilient and productive agency, similar to the efforts it takes to yield a bountiful harvest from a garden. We must be vigilant, thoughtful, and willing to adjust our strategies and tools depending on the season and both internal and external pressures that threaten our well being. Just like in gardening, there is no one size fits all approach in every climate for every crop that will work every time. But there are seven guiding principles that, when combined with the power of observation and a willingness to take action, enables you to produce a positive outcome. Today, I'll have just enough time to give you a quick overview of five of the seven principles. So if you'd like to read the full pocketbook, which covers each topic in greater depth, you can download it at gettingmomentum.com. Let's take a stroll through the garden and look at several principles that we can all learn from and apply strategically within the various agencies that we are growing. First, we must acknowledge that a garden's success lies outside of the control of the plants and in the control of you, the gardener. The key element of a healthy garden is the soil. That is your company culture. And in both cases, an agency and a garden, it's your growing medium. Soil is a dynamic, living ecosystem of microorganisms and any output from the roots of what's growing in the soil. It's not just dirt, and it has to be cared for as the living system that it is. Much the same, your company culture will not exist unless you bring it to life and keep a watchful eye that the right microorganisms are thriving within it. Keep in mind, there is no one kind of soil that works for every single plant, just as there is no one size fits all kind of agency culture to shoot for either. You are cultivating a team of individuals with unique needs, backgrounds, talents, and skill levels. That means you have to curate your soil to encompass the best, or at least the most suitable combination of factors to address how your individual team members function and what kind of produce your agency is taking to market. I do go through some of the examples in the full pocketbook, which you can download. It's also important to remember that soil becomes depleted of nutrients over time, and when it does, it negatively affects the health of the tree or the plant, just like the health of your team members can be depleted over time. So when your agency soil, that company culture is depleted, your talent is going to suffer. And as a gardener, you must regularly take stock of the condition of your company culture and the resources available to your team members. Remember also that long established plants are in need of nutrient boosts, and it's up to your leaders to observe when and to what degree those nutrient boosts have to become necessary for longer team members that have had tenure at your agency. So ask yourself these questions. What are the life giving aspects of your current company culture? And where do you need to reinvigorate your people with a new concept, a new challenge, a new experiment? Be observational and intentional in the need to supplement your soil and make adjustments so that it continues to positively feed your plants and promote the right kind of growth. The next facet of growing a resilient agency has to do with team member empowerment and giving each person room to grow so that they can complete their tasks and produce individually without constant oversight. This has a lot to do with the type of environment you create. In a garden, root binding is a potential problem that is also related to the plant's environment. That occurs when a plant is attempting to grow toward maturity, but the container in which it's planted is not large enough to accommodate this growth. So as a result, the plant becomes what's known as root bound. And when this happens, the plant becomes suffocated and it can no longer grow. This also makes the plant more susceptible to plant disease. And the same exact thing can happen at your agency if your team members are not given adequate space to grow. So it's up to you as the organization's leaders to facilitate that kind of favorable environment where they do have space to grow. In this agency environment, this can look like expanding a team member's role-specific responsibilities. Now, as team members grow, they don't just produce client outcomes either. Just as a plant does not grow only fruit, they also grow leaves. Leaves and shade are necessary components of a healthy plant. However, too much leaf growth means energy is going into managing the leaves rather than producing fruit. Just like some plants are more prone to investing their energy into developing additional branches and leaves rather than into fruit, some team members are also prone to investing their resources into new systems, more documentation, and better tools, simply because it provides them with more shade. It expands their comfort zone rather than producing fruit by cultivating client upsells and cross sell opportunities. So the key is discernment as you work to identify what documentation, what tools, and what procedures are genuinely boosting efficiency and enabling your agency to run more smoothly. And if and your team members are using unnecessary systems or tools that don't serve much of a purpose, it is time for some pruning. And then once pruned, be sure to establish an actual pruning schedule where you're going through and assessing what your policies, procedures, tools are and what is and is not relevant anymore. That way, you can assess everything that's going on operationally consistently and ensure you've balanced the right amount of leaf growth to sustain plant and fruit development. Now, when plants possess leaves that are too dense, when it's not properly pruned, or when the plants are sown too close together in your garden, the overgrowth minimizes air circulation between the different vegetation, and that can cause mildew and pest problems, which we'll address next. Even a garden that is planted and tended to carefully is susceptible to pests and disease problems, unfortunately. So, your goal is to address these issues swiftly and decisively so that the pests and disease are unable to proliferate and cause further damage to team morale and productivity. For agencies, these noxious elements can look like negative or draining clients and partnerships, toxic team members, and even overbearing policies and protocols. All of these can plague an agency and suck the life out of your team members, making it impossible for them to perform at their best. As you're juggling a wide variety of tasks to lead your agency, make sure that you've also established regular check in points to identify if any blight, mildews, or pests are present among your team members, particularly under the surface. Now, there may be issues festering that you won't be aware of unless you make the effort and take the time away from the urgent items in your inbox to notice these very important threats. Further, if you're waiting for your team members to bring updates, status reports, or challenges to you, you're limiting your capacity to keep a solid pulse on your agency. Many plant diseases and pest infestations are not apparent on the surface, and likewise, many of the issues that are plaguing your agency are not apparent on the surface. Taking time to wander around digitally and catch tidbits of conversation, assess tone and emoji or GIF use in internal channels, and identify trends of who is and who is not participating in certain conversations or activities are some other useful tactics for the digital adaptation of management by walking around. In this way, you're also more likely to detect signs of a problem early on. In the full Pocketbook, I do cover the agency equivalents that are synonymous with the likes of aphids and grubs and blight and mildews, and I give you actionable tips for how to address each of these issues decisively, as well as some ways to prevent the same issues from cropping up in the future. So, if you're dealing with underlying issues right now that are affecting performance and your ability to operate successfully, I recommend you download the full Pocketbook to read through those full sections. Now, let's shift our focus over to the actual produce of your agency. To help optimize your garden's production and ensure long term sustainability, you would employ proactive strategies around crop selection, planting schedules, crop density, and crop rotation. These principles apply also to your agency. One metric to look at to assess the health of your selection and your planting schedule is your AGI to FTE ratio. This ratio is your annual gross income per full-time employee, and your goal is to maintain between $180,000 to $260,000 per employee as a general rule of thumb. So to achieve that goal, think about your schedules or the time periods you allocate to onboarding, project delivery, and offboarding. Do you actually know the amount of time being spent in these areas? And if you don't, can you implement some time tracking to strategically start to understand what's going on in each of these periods of time? And then how can you maximize your production without completely depleting your soil and creating early onset plant disease, aka burning out your team members? So, one suggestion is to implement waterfall charts in order to visualize various client loads and how you're utilizing employees to accomplish projects. You can ensure a steady flow of projects and tasks rather than an uneven distribution where team members are either inundated or being underutilized. Ideally, you do want to maintain a utilization rate of 85% or higher per employee, but you also want to make sure that there is time and margin for team members to take vacation, to be away, to take care of a sick kid if they need to. So keep all of those factors in mind. Now, the concept of crop density is another that can be transferred from the garden to your agency. And this has to do with how many of your team members are actively working on an account at a single time. Depending on the kind of services your agency delivers, you may need to allocate more specialists or more generalists to service clients on a particular project. However, you do want to be intentional about not overcrowding when it comes to your staff resources, as overcrowding will make your agency susceptible to a swath of issues like meeting drag and not being able to make timely decisions and not having proper accountability and getting really good results. You just have people stepping over each other. And then finally, to maximize the output of your agency, you should think about crop rotation or how you're moving around human resources to give them the best chance of thriving. So, in a garden, soil does become malnourished when the same plant is expected to produce a certain yield year after year after year in the same area of the garden. And similarly, if you've had team members performing the same responsibilities in the same role for several years, assess why that is the case and if it's causing any sort of burnout, drain, or other problems that you need to address. On the positive side, you can also establish mutually beneficial plants together so they can feed off of each other. In your agency, this looks like intentionally creating mutually beneficial pods or relationships between different silos or division or departments in your agency. And where the outputs are different, but the output of one supports the skill development and output of the other, you can have the makings of a really, really good symbiotic relationship in your agency. You can also try creating ways to give your team members new clients to work on and new problems to solve. Even if the client or the problem is not new to the agency as a whole, having a fresh set of eyes on the case can breathe new life into initiatives and client outcomes that might seem to be withering. You can also change up what team members you have working together on different projects and client accounts so that they're gaining fresh skills, different perspectives and insights, and being reinvigorated and energized from one another. Ultimately, gardens, just like your agencies, take hard work, thoughtfulness, and dedication. You can't cultivate a resilient agency or a resilient garden that is sustainable and productive year after year without a couple of these key practices. Your agency and your team members need similar kinds of care and management to remain healthy, resilient, and productive for the long haul. Each plant or team member that you add to the mix will present a new variable that may require you to adjust your company culture and the different environments to foster maximum output. You may also have to proactively apply tailored strategies and practices to nourish your team members and encourage their growth. And sometimes you might encounter various garden variety pests and problems from root rot and root binding to grubs and aphids and disease. But once again, observing, being observational, and then decisively applying a remedy is key. After all, it does take time to grow a successful and resilient agency, to cultivate those favorable conditions, and to improve your harvest. These things don't happen overnight or even in a week or a month, but every day you can venture out to your garden, into your agency, among your team members with a purpose. Practice intentionality. Wander around. Digitally, you can do this too, and see how your team members are doing. Check the nutrition level, check how they're doing, see where they need to be poured into. Sometimes you'll be viewing things from above, seeing how all the individual elements are working together as a whole, and sometimes you'll be in the weeds. But day in and day out, stewardship of your agency will make sure that you're not missing any important truths and that you're maintaining the right conditions for your team members to thrive. In this way, your agency can become an industry staple that's not going anywhere. I challenge you to put into practice at least 2 observational techniques after this lightning talk. And if you'd like to read the full pocket book, which covers each topic in greater depth, you can download it at gettingmomentum.com. I'm Danielle Photo. Cheers to building your resilient agency.